Hello, I'm Daniel. I am going to lead a compassion meditation today, but prior to that, I'm going to talk a little bit about compassion, what it is, why it helps us, why it's important, and I hope that can be helpful. We need compassion in the world right now. So, in a Buddhist context, compassion isn't limited to a feeling toward others, but rather we have compassion toward others, we have compassion toward ourselves as well. And sometimes compassion towards ourselves is even more important. We may not act in our best interest all the time. That's what it comes down to. We may think that, oh, well, of course I'm compassionate toward myself, but we don't always think in terms of our best interest. And although we do wish to avoid pain and experience pleasure as much as possible, it can also be very easy to put ourselves in bad situations where we're going to suffer more and to just say, oh, well. So really what we're talking about is, can it be said that we're always acting out of compassion for ourselves? We can judge ourselves harshly sometimes. I like to say that most people have where either they judge themselves really harshly and they think they're the worst person in the world, or they sort of put themselves on a pedestal and they think everyone else is below them and they think they're always right. And many of us experience both of those at different times, and rarely do we really see things clearly. So in terms of compassion, when we don't have compassion for ourselves, it's when we don't think we deserve it. It's when we're suffering and we think, well, I deserve this. We shouldn't think that about ourselves or about other people. And sometimes we do things that we know are bad for us. That's because we aren't giving ourselves the right amount of compassion. We should do what's best for ourselves as much as possible. We should do what's best for others as much as possible. And also, giving into compassion and lashing out and giving into our temptations that we know are harmful, those are ways of not giving ourselves compassion. So, I'll talk about what compassion is, now that I've gone into all that, just to say that it includes you as well. Compassion is a wish to relieve the suffering of ourselves and others. A wish to relieve the suffering of ourselves and others. So, I talked about kindness before, or loving kindness before, which is a wish for good things to happen for ourselves and others. And this is sort of the other side of the coin from that. This is a wish for bad things to not happen to ourselves and others, or a wish for people to feel better when they're struggling. A wish for people to feel better when they're struggling. So, when someone has had a death in the family and you go visit them and you ask how they're doing, that's compassion. That's compassion. Kindness, on the other hand, or loving kindness, on the other hand, is when someone gets a promotion and you call them to congratulate them. That's kindness, and that's a good thing too. That's the difference. Compassion is others are suffering and I care. I'm suffering also and I care. I just wanted to bring up that self-compassion thing at the beginning because I think we don't think of it that way, and I do think we should, because we could just be really selfless and really caring to others, but then forget to include ourselves in that. Including ourselves is important, and it is compassion that helps us make better choices or avoid really bad choices that we sometimes make. It's compassion that helps us do that. Just knowing, oh, well, I'm going to suffer if I do that. So maybe I shouldn't do that, right? So that is how I see compassion. It is a wish for less suffering in the world. A wish for less suffering in the world. It is helping people that really need help, helping the struggling and the broken people. And that definitely includes ourselves. So, for this meditation, this is part of a series called the Four Immeasurables Meditations, and I've adapted this from a writing by a teacher named Ken MacLeod. So if it sounds familiar to you and you're familiar with his work, then that would explain that. But so I do have to give a little credit there. So what it is I'm going to ask you to bring people to mind and just mentally recite these lines. And it's designed to help us or open our hearts a little, which is a hard thing to do sometimes, a lot of the time. Especially when there's lots of awful things going on in the world. I guess there's probably always lots of awful things going on in the world. In Buddhism, we call this the world of suffering, or samsara, and there's a reason why. It's because there's a lot of suffering all the time. And that's why the world needs a lot of compassion. It needs us to be sort of spiritual warriors, to be out there just practicing love and compassion, just being the helpers and helping others. That's what the world needs for us, rather than just adding to the problems and making things worse. So, all of that being said, I'm going to lead the meditation now, and we'll see how it goes. So, sit up as straight as you can. Find a position where your legs aren't going to fall asleep. And this is called relaxation. It's resting your hands on your knees. And I recommend that, but I also do recommend what's called, I call it the bowl. Fancy people call it the cosmic mudra. I think that sounds absurd. But it's hand on top of the other, thumbs gently touching. Some people say it's really important that right hand be on top. Some people say left hand. I think it doesn't matter. But I'm just going to do the relaxation. I'm just going to put my hands on my knees. And this is an eyes closed practice. It's a compassion practice. A lot of those are closed eyes practices. So I recommend either close your eyes or put your attention on something that's really not interesting. If you've got a wall nearby that's got nothing on it, that'd be a great target. But for this practice, for practices, I recommend eyes open, but for these compassion, heart-centered practices, I do suggest eyes closed. Sit up as straight as you can. Okay. I'm going to ring my bell. I have a bell. Begin by taking 3 deep, heavy breaths. And just take a minute to sit here, just being in the quiet, in the silence. Now, I want you to bring yourself to mind. Think about yourself. And we're just going to mentally say to ourselves these lines. I'm going to recite each one, and I want you to just mentally say it to yourself. And see if that makes you feel anything. I'm going to say each one of them twice. Here we go. May I be free of suffering, harm, and disturbance. May I be free of suffering, harm, and disturbance. Just take a minute to really dig deep and reflect on that. May I accept things just as they are. May I accept things just as they are. May I experience the world accepting me just as I am. May I experience the world accepting me just as I am. May I serve whatever arises. May I serve whatever arises. Now I want you to bring to mind someone you really love and care about. Someone outside of yourself that you really love and care about. It can be a spouse, it can be a child, it can be your best friend, it could be a relative, it could even be a pet if you want. Someone you really love. And just take a minute and bring them to mind. And we're going to go through the lines again. So with your person you care about a lot, may you be free of suffering, harm, and disturbance. May you be free of suffering, harm, and disturbance. May you accept things just as they are. May you accept things just as they are. May you experience the world accepting you just as you are. May you experience the world accepting you just as you are. May you serve whatever arises. May you serve whatever arises. Now, next, I want you to bring to mind someone, we call it a neutral person. It is someone who you know who they are, but they really don't mean anything to you, or they really don't mean much to you. So it can be a coworker you've never talked to. It can be a neighbor you've never talked to. It can be your mailman. It can be someone on TV that you've never met, that you don't have a feeling about. It's supposed to be a being that you have no feeling about. So take a minute to bring someone to mind like that. Someone who is a neutral person. You don't have any positive or negative feelings toward them. And with this neutral person in mind, we're going to mentally go through these phrases again. To the neutral person. May you be free of suffering, harm, and disturbance. May you be free of suffering, harm, and disturbance. May you accept things just as they are. May you accept things just as they are. May you experience the world accepting you just as you are. May you experience the world accepting you just as you are. May you serve whatever arises. May you serve whatever arises. And then finally, we're going to now bring to mind someone that you don't like. Someone who really you have a really negative opinion about, or who really makes you upset, who really bothers you. And this can be someone in your life. It can be someone you see on the news that really bothers you. Somebody that you think is bad. And try to bring that person to mind. Someone that you're against. This is called the negative person. And it's with this negative person in mind that we're going to go through these lines again. So, with the negative person, we'll repeat mentally. May you be free of suffering, harm, and disturbance. May you be free of suffering, harm, and disturbance. May you accept things just as they are. May you accept things just as they are. May you experience the world accepting you just as you are. May you experience the world accepting you just as you are. May you serve whatever arises. May you serve whatever arises. That is the compassion meditation. I think that we have to remind ourselves again and again, in a Buddhist context, when we talk about compassion, nobody gets left out. Nobody gets left out. That is hard for us to reflect on. It's hard for us to think about. Boundless, that's why we say things like boundless compassion or boundless heart. We're talking about everyone. In big letters, everyone. It's easy to have compassion for your relatives, your best friends, your kids, but it's harder to have compassion for the people you don't like. The mean person at work, the person that cuts you off in traffic, the politician you really don't like, right? It's harder to have compassion in those areas, but the teaching is that no one gets left out of our hearts. And so that's a thing to think about in difficult times. And it's very challenging sometimes. But that is what the teaching is. That is what we are called to do. So that's it for today. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me and to do this meditation with me, and have a good day.